Chris, what did you make of those GDP numbers this week?
They were a bit challenging. The Australian economy does remain under a fair amount of pressure. The expectation amongst pretty much all economists at the start of this year was that we would begin to turn the corner in the second half of 24, that tax cuts and, as it later turned out, big electricity subsidies would put enough money in the pockets of the punters to see the economy gradually regather some steam. That wasn't the case in yesterday's numbers. And in particular, I tend to look at living standards. I'd expected the tax cuts and the subsidies would give a handy boost to living standards, but they didn't. That barely shifted. They peaked 3 years ago, living standards in Australia, and still down just over 10% from that peak.
So to pick up that issue I was just chatting to my panel with, what does this say then to you as someone who's been a watcher of the economy and the budget for so long as to where we head over coming months? If you can get the crystal ball out ahead of sort of February, March, what does it say on the inflation and rates front to you?
Well, the chess pieces did move a bit with those national accounts numbers yesterday. They were weaker than most economists expected, weaker than the Reserve Bank expected. And the weaker the economy is, the faster that inflation comes down. So ahead of the numbers, markets didn't think there would be a rate cut until May, basically after the election. Markets are now closer to 50-50 coin toss, whether it'll be May or perhaps as early as February. And, certainly the door to a February rate cut was opened by those numbers yesterday. To Darren's point a moment ago about timing, that may give the government a reason to hold off. May also give the government a reason to be careful around some extra spending and spending promises ahead of the election. But it is all very finely poised at the moment.
It is, isn't it? And I read your report, your preview for the mid-year budget update. We're heading to Christmas, but still a fair bit of economic news around, including what's known as MyEFO. Simple terms, you've said the carnival is over.
People think that the federal budget moves because of the decisions of politicians. By and large, the bigger thing is what's happening out there in the economy, and the combination of three very big things: war, migration and inflation has meant much, much more tax than Treasury had expected as recently as 20 months ago. And so that combination has made the budget a lot better. Might have been tough times in the economy. It's never been better times in the budget. Basically, the world gave us a pay rise. Inflation took money from families and gave it to governments. And migration meant more people to tax. But that carnival is over. Yesterday's numbers, again, feeding into the thought that the economic surprises will no longer be helping the budget from here. Some people are still talking about the chance of a government snatching a third surplus. Not going to happen. It is a very substantial weakening in the budget, and it stays weak thereafter.
Yes, it does indeed. So, and the 104 billion the government's added in terms of spending since the last election doesn't assist in that case, Chris.
No, they've complicated things for themselves. They got an enormous amount of, I'll call it luck again, war, migration and inflation dropped a lot of extra tax revenue into their laps, not as a result of any decision they took. $365 billion over 4 years. They've spent $104 billion out of that windfall. They've also raised taxes by $44 billion. That's a bit of an offset to the spending. So the net worsening on the budget balance, about $60 billion. But if you have very good times in the budget, and remember it is very good, or has been very good times in the budget, even if it hasn't been in the economy, that may not have been the moment to throw too much money around, and that does add to the challenges for the future.
Chris Richardson, great to get your insights as always. Thank you.
Thanks, KG.